Hello, this is Luke Stokes, Managing Director for the Foundation for Interwallet Operability. I'm joined by David Gold, who is one of the co-founders of the original idea for the FIO Protocol. And in our update this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about DACs and DAOs. I've been very passionate about them in my crypto career, starting years ago with the EOS DAC and even before then. And David's kind of vision for how the FIO Protocol would eventually have to become a decentralized consortia. So, David, awesome to talk to you about this stuff. This is kind of an interesting thing. Actually, it was kind of spurred by a conversation with Mo Levin earlier today. He was like, "Hey, how come there's no content about these kind of service provider entities that serve DACs? How does this all work? How do they?" And I was realizing, I'm like, yeah, no one really talks about this stuff. So, and with the news today about Shapeshift, not today, but just in the last week or two, fully decentralizing their company, obviously very exciting. Your connection with Eric as well. We should have a fun conversation. So
absolutely looking forward to it.
All right, so I guess I'll kick us off kind of with my own passion. I started researching DACs and DAOs, decentralized autonomous communities, consortia, and I talk about these as a group of people with a shared goal, decentralized being no single point of failure, autonomous not really meaning AI, but just meaning like fully transparent smart contracts where you put in input, you get consistent output. There isn't some, Enron or Bernie Madoff, books on the side, cooked up. Everyone gets to see what the inputs are and the outputs are. That's what I think of in terms of autonomous, consistent inputs and outputs. And then the C, the company, or the O, if it's a DAC or DAO, can be organization, consortia, community, company, corporation, whatever. And I've been really excited about this in terms of, having run my own business for 10 years and realizing how much value you get from the wisdom of the crowds, and recognizing when you give ownership to people and they have a level of participation where they're a user, they're a customer, and they're an owner because of the way the tokenomics work and the way you can do active worker proposals and the way you can use the token to get some service. It creates a lot of value and a lot of interesting possibilities that I think are eventually going to become more interesting than corporations. And I think it was kind of my passion to start talking about DACs and DAOs that kind of got my attention of, I haven't really asked him this, but I probably should. My relationship with Brock Pierce, actually, because he started talking about DACs and DAOs a whole lot as well. And then we started getting to know each other even after I moved here to Puerto Rico. So I'm curious. So that's kind of my start. I made it more official when I joined with EOS DAC. Even before that, I guess with Steam and Hive, it kind of operates as a DAC DAO as well. Been there for 5 years. But when I started working with the EOS DAC, we were building the DAC factory. It was a community-owned block producer that helped launch the EOS chain, but also a DAC enabler. Like we were building the software to build DACs. And then since then, I've worked with the DevX DAO, which is a DAO that's kind of connected to the Emergent Technology Association, which is related to Casper Labs, which gave them a donation. And then, of course, FIO. Obviously, FIO is the big one that is running now for over a year as a really successful decentralized autonomous consortia. We actually have all the members, myself included, David included. We're all working with active worker proposals. We have a multi-sig of the community treasury. We have a steering committee that helps us make decisions about the budget and all that stuff. And it's kind of neat. Like we get to point at this as an example. But David, why don't you chat a little bit about kind of how did you even know that a DAC DAO was a thing and that this was something you wanted to pursue to decentralize the kind of management of this, or not really management, but even just support of this protocol that is already decentralized and run by the block producers? And then maybe touch on kind of your relationship to Eric and the whole Shapeshift story.
Yeah, so thanks. Glad to join you here. I've spent most of my career in centralized organizations. So as a, venture capitalist, as a dot-com entrepreneur, I mean, everything I've done has been in and around centralized companies. And so, when blockchain erupted on the scene and I went down the crypto rabbit hole, I did start to see something that was very different. And, I'm going to take for granted that listeners here understand the value of decentralized ledgers and the decentralized element of that we don't have to talk about that here and the power that brings. So really, as I started digging into this and looking at it, and then when I started thinking about the need for FIO, as a decentralized usability layer for the entire ecosystem, the concept that you would have a centralized company that's really running a decentralized protocol, to me, it just doesn't make sense. And there are many examples in the blockchain world of this exact thing happening. Ripple probably being one of the best ones, where you kind of look at it and say,
some might say that's not really a blockchain, is it?
Yeah, now we're decentralized. How, what? And so I just think that if you have a private company that has a profit motive, that is the one that creates, launches, etc., a protocol, that there's an inherent conflict of interest there to the goals and the benefits of decentralization. So ultimately, you have to have something like a DAC. You have to have a decentralized community that's supporting and driving the protocol. Certainly, what you see around things like Ethereum and Bitcoin, where it is very, very decentralized. And that's really what, pretty early on with envisioning FIO, I said, this is where it has to get to. It has to come out this way. It can't be a ripple. It has to be a truly decentralized protocol and a decentralized project as well. And that's really what we have today, which is pretty cool.
It's super exciting. And I remember when you and Pablo, actually kind of the two co-founders of this idea, when you approached me, and I think I was out there in Colorado as well. And I was speaking at a conference or something, and you approached me, and I just recently sold my business and was doing consulting and advising. And when you presented the idea, I immediately was thinking like, oh, this could work if it's decentralized. And as I learned about this usability protocol, and for those who maybe are new to FIO, FIO is human readable addresses that provides decentralized payment requests with contextual metadata like memos about that transaction. It's making crypto easier for everyone. So I'm Luke @Stokes, that's my crypto handle. And it's very easy to be able to interact and use all the different cryptocurrencies and blockchains when you have that layer on top of it. And so I got very excited about participating, and kind of as things evolved over time, it made sense that I was kind of the right person with my experience with DACs and DAOs to try to lead this. And so far as managing director, I'm able to do that to some degree, but it's fun in that I don't have to I'm not like the CEO. I'm not making decisions in a vacuum. I have the steering committee, I have the board. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on a bit, and again, I want to make this really clear, neither David and I are legal professionals. We're not lawyers. We're not giving legal advice in any way. You definitely need to look at your jurisdictional laws as far as what makes sense for you. But talking about the kind of service provider aspect, I think it's one of the most confusing points of a DAC or DAO that most of the DACs and DAOs that I've been involved in kind of find themselves needing. But it's clear to me also that no one really kind of knows how they figured this out. Like it's just kind of internally discussed of those who know. And so I wanted to share my screen a little bit here. One example that I first got involved in was Decoco. Decoco was a service provider for EOS DAC. And the way this came about was there was an understanding of joint and several liability. Meaning if anyone in this decentralized, community of people that have no legal standing, and especially at that time, years ago, in any jurisdiction, joint and several liability means if one person makes a mistake, someone else can sue some other person who had nothing to do with that person's mistake, just because that person's got a lot of money and they're going to be liable for what someone else did, meaning joint and several liability. Everyone is responsible for everyone else's activities. Normally, when you have like an LLC or some other jurisdictionally recognized legal framework, you can avoid those type of concerns. So quickly, they realized that we needed this kind of entity that was legally understood, that would protect joint and several liability situations, because anyone would just contract directly with the service provider as far as like payroll type concerns or things of that nature. And they wouldn't be seen as doing business directly with this entity that's not even recognized by a government. So this is kind of one example. Another one is the Emergent Technologies Association. This is a group that's working with the DevX DAO, which you may have heard about. They've been operating for about a year now. Really exciting project to help empower open source projects. They got a very hefty grant from the Casper Labs Association. And so there's like a work of a group of people that have been meeting that I've been part of for, probably over a year now, kind of every week connecting together. It's a really advanced proposal system that they're working on. And they also were realizing that they needed this service provider, in essence, to do certain contractual things. No one actually contracts directly with the DAO because it's just kind of unknown. And of course, we've already been discussing FIO itself and the way the foundation works, which is the Cayman-based nonprofit. This also functions as a service provider for what we call the DAC, the Decentralized Autonomous Consortia. And we've published some information here on a knowledge base, kind of giving an overview, how it's a nonprofit, kind of how it's structured. We've also gone a little bit further into details of like, how are we going to use the community treasury, for example? How are the tokens? What's the governance for the tokens? And all these kind of things. And so recognizing that having leadership, having some structure within these models is really important. A lot of these protocols that are just kind of fully decentralized, it's not really a thing, right? You actually have to have people that show up to work and do work and improve the protocol and help promote it. You need marketing, you need biz dev, you need development, you need, all types of different layers involved, project management, product management, all these things. And so that's where the worker proposal concept comes into play. And having that run through a legally understood entity helps people deal with things like payroll, taxes, and like whatever might come up. But it's as I was thinking about it, as I was thinking about our call today, I was realizing it's just something that people don't really talk about much. When we were talking earlier, David, you mentioned not only the joint and several liability, but even just the jurisdictional confusion. And maybe you could talk a little bit about like what's been going on in Wyoming. I hear there's a new DAC, kind of legal DAO type deal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just starting to dig into that. It's really exciting because it really is probably the first example of a government at any level recognizing decentralized autonomous entities as a legal structure. That is pretty effing cool because, while the entities that become attached with DACs and DAOs are most commonly called, service providers or service entities, I would probably call them, legal service providers or legal protection entities, because as you mentioned, the main reason they have to exist is because of tort law in most countries and protecting the people who are involved in the project, and because the projects still have to interact with centralized companies in lots of different ways for lots of different things. And those centralized companies all generally require some sort of a contract or agreement, and they need an entity on the other end to sign it. They wouldn't understand a decentralized autonomous consortium like FIO if it didn't have a legal structure in the Cayman Islands. They wouldn't get that. Now, what's exciting about Wyoming is you're seeing the first effort where, whoa, so maybe we actually can have a decentralized legal structure and have an entity that can sign and truly be decentralized. It doesn't have to have any traditional centralized entity like a foundation in the Cayman Islands. So that is pretty cool.
It's super exciting. And I think it's interesting news now. Another reason we want to talk about this was, you're friends with Eric Voorhees and Shapeshift. You guys are both there in Denver. I think you've been kind of related to their board or on the board, and he's helped with our board as far as like the previous company that was involved. And, what are your thoughts on kind of what they've done? I mean, it's kind of been big news that they kind of made the announcement they're fully decentralizing and essentially winding down their company, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's exciting to watch. It's going to be exciting to see it unfold. And I give a lot of kudos to Eric and to the Shapeshift team for doing that. I think they've realized that the best solution. They've built a great platform for having self-sovereign custody of your keys, as well as trading those tokens and interacting with those tokens in a self-sovereign and not centralized way. They've never been a centralized exchange, and that's in the sense of a Binance or a Coinbase or anything like that. And so they've really taken it to the next level and said, we need to decentralize the whole thing. They're open sourcing the code. The company I think is not going to exist anymore. I'm not actually completely clear on that. I know that most of the employees are going to end up being workers in the community, just like with FIO, where everybody who's involved in the project is a community worker. And I do think that there were a number of drivers in them making that decision, and one of them was they have been close to FIO and they've watched what FIO has done, and I think they've realized, wow, this really is possible. We really can do this. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's super cool. And I think, again, like you said, we're an operating DAC that is an example now you can point to be like, hey, that's kind of working out fairly well for that protocol. And we're growing as a team. I think we have, 20 something different worker proposals that I'm currently, that are active this month. And that's super exciting. I just want to kind of end this with an invitation. If you're watching this, please know that if you can add value, as I mentioned, marketing, business development, programming, all these different categories, anything that any normal business or company would need, we have opportunities for it. And so if you want to help add value to the community, the way we do that is through worker proposals. And we'd love to have you join our Discord, have some communication with us, tell us how you can add value, how you can, increase what we're doing, get us more integrations into more wallets and exchanges, help people understand education, all of that. We'd love to talk with you. And, if it fits in the budget, if there's an approval by the steering committee, if the multi-sig comes through, you might be able to get compensated for adding value to the network. So really excited to have these conversations. I feel a little bit vindicated because, you know, for the last couple of years, I was like, was I wrong? How come more people aren't excited about DACs and DAOs? And it's like slowly starting to catch up, almost like when I was getting into Bitcoin, you know, almost 8.5 years ago now. You know, it was that same kind of like, I'm so excited about this, but no one else cares. I kind of feel the same way about DACs and DAOs. I'm like super excited about it. And now people are slowly starting to care. And it's fun to be involved in a project is showing how it's done. So thank you so much again, David, for your time. We're trying to keep these short and sweet. Hopefully that was interesting to you. If you have any questions about DACs or DAOs, how we've been doing this with FIO, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you as well. Definitely join our Discord or follow us on social media on Twitter at Join FIO or our Telegram as well. Love to hear from you. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you later.